right, welcome aboard, everybody. Manchild here, Boy Green to my right, talking Jets, Jets. This guy back from some kind of beach party. We'll have to get into that maybe later this week. But my goodness, there is some breaking news on the Jets. We want to get right to that. We are presented today by Northeast Roofing Professionals. Today's video brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. All right, let's talk some Jets. And we've got a guy that we've had on before. I don't think he's ever joined us on the podcast, though, but he definitely joined us on the radio show. He covers the Jets daily. He's the Play Like a Jet podcast host. Let's welcome in the one, the only Scott Mason. Scott, how are you, my friend?
Hey, guys. Great to be with you.
All right, breaking news here on the Jets today, so I want to get right to the breaking story. Rich Cimini story, there it is, right up on the page there for everybody to see. That Geno Smith case, and we're talking about the domestic dispute case that happened back in June with this woman at his home that police were at, and then we saw, body cam videos and all this different stuff. This investigation has concluded, and as you see there in the graphic, no charges are being brought. So let's talk about this news, Scott, and what it means to the Jets as they are just, 11 days away from rookies reporting, vets on the 28th. I mean, we are in the month where training camps are about to start.
I guess with the Jets, it was too quiet. Everybody was remarking about how quiet it was the last few months and how we haven't seen any controversies or anything like that. So something had to pop up because everybody was a little too restless. But I told people that I wasn't even going to talk about that Geno case because we had absolutely no information on it. All we had was some woman on Instagram yelling at Geno Smith and him telling her to get away from him. What we later found out was that woman wasn't even the mother of his child, which is what was assumed at first. And so I just said, until we know something, there's really nothing to go on here. The police said they were looking into it. And quite frankly, that woman on the Instagram video seemed kind of insane, which doesn't mean necessarily that Geno hadn't done anything wrong, but it did mean that I was going to take it with a grain of salt until we found out more about what happened. And as Rich Cimini reported, it looks like the police looked into it. There's nothing there. And now they can move on. I know people have made hay out of Geno Smith getting a speeding ticket, which I don't really understand what that's about. I watched the video. It was a little goofy that he tried to come up with a bizarre excuse that he told the cop. I heard some cops said that you don't have to drive with your license, which is not true anywhere, obviously. But at the end of the day, he was driving 70 in a 45, which is not the best, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I haven't done it myself. I'm sure just about anybody listening to us or watching us right now has done it themselves. I know police officers that have admitted to me that they do it when they're driving privately. So while it's not the best, it's really not that big of a deal. And now the Jets can get ready for training camp and for round 2 of the Geno Smith experience.
Let's talk about that part of it, Scott. Round 2 of the Geno Smith experience, because, Geno's maturity came into question at the tail end of his run with the New York Jets, with the IK and Kampale incident in the locker room, and then he ends up exiting stage left. He goes on this sabbatical where he's a backup quarterback in a lot of different places, and now he's back. But during that sabbatical, I don't remember a lot of maturity questions in that decade where he sort of bounced around the league. So what the Jets fans thought they were getting is a more mature version of Geno Smith here in 2026, a decade later. And then they had this run of things that got him all in the headlines. Do you question at all the maturity with any of these events? Whether it was, again, he was stopped by the police in March and there was the wrong tags on a vehicle. You mentioned the speeding incident that happened on July 6th. And then we had this assault allegation case that has been dismissed. Seems like there's nothing much ado about nothing with that case. Do you at all question the maturity of Geno Smith heading into training camp?
Not really. I just don't think that getting a speeding ticket is that big of a deal. If he had been going 110 miles an hour with a kid in the back seat and loaded guns and drugs, which Sheldon Richardson did years ago, then I'd say, okay, this is concerning for a variety of reasons. But a guy driving 70 in a 45 is just not really that big of a deal to me. Like I said, I've done it myself. I know many people have done it. The thing with the tags, he may have just forgotten. Again, to me, this is just, if you're somebody that really didn't want Geno Smith here in the first place and is anti-Geno Smith, you'll make hay out of this. Everybody else will just mostly shrug their shoulders. I think with Geno, what it really comes down to is you hear a lot of the players and a lot of the coaches that have had high marks for him since he's been back. And Chris Nimbley of JetsInsider.com told me on the show that the word around Florham Park is that people that were there the first time, that when Geno was there, have been saying he seems like a completely different guy, at least on the field. Listen, if he speeds off the field, it is what it is. There's a limit to how much I can be concerned about what these guys do when they're not playing football. So I'm not really that worried about it. I think what you have to look at as a Jets fan now with Geno is just simply how much does he have left? He was terrible last year with the Raiders. How much of that was the situation? How much of it was just bad luck in terms of having bad personnel and bad coaching? The Chip Kelly experience, I'm sure, was a disaster. So I think if you're being reasonable, and I said this to a couple of people, I am hoping that he can at least provide a baseline level of competence. So even if he's like the 22nd or 23rd best quarterback, that would be significantly below average, but it would be enough where it would at least give the Jets an opportunity to put some points on the board and for the younger players to show what they can do while Geno holds down the fort for whoever they hopefully get in the draft next year. So that's sort of what I'm looking for with Geno. If he gives you anything more than that, it's gravy, it's a bonus. But I just would like a baseline level of competence where he's not embarrassing and the offense can function.
Well, Scott, I do want to talk about Geno Smith, the player, but before I do, this is fascinating. This is what's fascinating to me about this series of incidents. I'll call it a series of incidents, whether innocent or guilty or still to be determined in some cases. Fine. We could discuss the merits of it as you were earlier. But you'd think like a lot of guys, it's New York, and you come to New York, and that city just, there's a lot of trouble you can get into. Not that there's not trouble everywhere you go, but New York presents itself with a little bit more trouble.
Sure.
Geno hasn't been in New York. This is all happening in
Right.
Florida,
in Florida,
where he apparently has a beautiful mansion. And I'm sure it's wonderful, and he's got a nice palace there, and probably a gated community, and nobody's coming in there but him and his friends. And yet here's where he's getting into. He hasn't even arrived in New York yet, for crying out loud. I mean, where trouble is abound, and there's lots of stuff going on. And this other piece of this, Scott, I'll let you address this too. What is with this guy about not carrying a license? I mean, it's not that hard. We all have wallets. You stick the license. It never leaves my wallet. I mean, I think most people operate that way. At worst, maybe they leave it in their car. I understand he has like 15 cars and doesn't know which one has which license plate, but whatever, but can you put your license in your pocket and just keep it there, man? Put it in your wallet and keep it there. What is the problem here? I mean, that just lends itself to stupidity. I mean, we could talk about maturity and we could talk about stupidity. And I think both of these things are at play right now with these couple of incidents, these traffic violations, minor as they might be, with Geno Smith.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I will say this. I have been guilty a time or two of forgetting my license or forgetting my registration. And generally, if it's something that's like very localized, if the cops know you, or at least in my experience, they may follow you back to your apartment or house or wherever it is you live and say, okay, if you can provide proof there, if you're lucky. And there are times where you're not so lucky. I very rarely forget my license or my registration, but I can't say it's never happened. So I can't go crazy on Geno Smith here. I will say, I do hope that this or these series of minor incidents, puts in his head that he needs to be a little bit more mindful of carrying that stuff with him at all times. He thinks that because he's Geno Smith, the cops are just going to know who he is. But it seems like, honestly, he wasn't driving all that far. It was a local road, and he may have just forgotten to stuff his license in his pants, which, again, careless and stupid, as you said, but not something that's going to make me worry about him as the quarterback of the Jets in 2026 in a transition year.
So, Scott, is this just a massive sigh of relief from the Jets that it's just over? Like, this feels like finality on this situation. Throw the traffic stuff aside, but like on this main thing that could have been a huge story, a bigger story, if he had been criminally charged or arrested or God knows what could have happened. But now that all of that's in the rearview mirror and we're 2 weeks out for training camp and now the Jets can focus on football, do you believe this is a sigh of relief from people in the Jets building?
I would think so, but I also suspect that the Jets probably knew from the beginning that this was nothing because, remember, we're talking about organizations that have billions of dollars behind them. I remember there was a show called The Game. I don't know if you ever watched it. It started off on the CW and then it went to BET. And there was one player on the show who was doing steroids, and one of the coaches said, "You got a piss test coming up in a week. I'm just letting you know." And he's like, "Oh, coach, I don't need to worry about that." And he turned to the guy who was on steroids and said, "Son, this is $1 billion organization. We know everything you do. We know when you wipe your butt, what hand you use. We know what you buy at the grocery store." And so I would imagine that the Jets probably knew from the get-go that there was nothing to this. And if you notice, they didn't put out any statements. They didn't say anything about it. They just kind of laid back. So I'm sure that they're relieved that this doesn't have to be talked about anymore, but I would imagine that they probably knew right away that this wasn't something that was going to be concerning to anybody.
Manchild Show with Boyd Green Digital at MC Show Digital, our handle on YouTube. Don't forget to like the video on the way in. And also, if you're not already a subscriber, what are you waiting for, man? It's absolutely free. There's the link right there. We are almost at 1,000 subscribers and need your help to get there. So everybody get in there. We've only been out here a year in this little YouTube world after doing radio for over 25 years. So we need your help to grow our subscribership and to grow our brand a little bit on YouTube. We're talking with Scott Mason, New York Jets guy, Play Like a Jet daily podcast. You got to check that out, folks. Maybe we could put a link, Boyd Green, in our video so that you can click on it and check out Scott's podcast. Scott, let's talk about play now, okay? All right, we're approaching training camp, just a couple weeks away. All right, before we know it, rookies are going to be in camp. The Jets' first practice with the whole team is the 29th of July. So a lot to look forward to later this month. Football is about to happen in a big way, and we're looking forward to it as podcasters who cover 3 NFL teams. So let's talk about Geno Smith, the player. You said it in your earlier answer. The Jets need competence at the quarterback position. The Jets need Geno Smith to be competent. All right. Now, 3 years ago, Geno Smith was more than competent. He was throwing for over 4,000 yards. And how many touchdowns, Boyd Green? I'm sure you've memorized it for the Seattle Seahawks.
30 touchdowns
30.
Was his high. Yes.
But then the last 2 seasons, where he was still a starting quarterback, Geno Smith was throwing the ball to the other team more than he was throwing the ball to his own teammates. So the question remains, which Geno Smith will the Jets have? Let me ask you, when you use the word competence and Geno Smith and Jets all in the same sentence, what does that mean from a statistical standpoint?
I think with Geno Smith, what you have to understand, and this has always been the case, is that Geno takes chances. And I think this is part of what you have to remember with what happened with the Raiders last year. I know Chris Sims has talked about this a lot. If you go back and you watch Geno Smith's Raiders tape, what you're going to see is that there were games where the Raiders were getting absolutely crushed. And a lot of quarterbacks would have just laid down their sword and said, "I'm not going to hurt my stats. I'm not going to risk throwing interceptions. I'm just going to play it safe and pad my stats. And that way I'll look better." But that's not Geno. Geno is a guy that, come hell or high water, he's going to take some chances. He's going to throw into tight windows. He's going to go downfield. He's going to occasionally take chances into double coverage that he probably shouldn't take. So there's that element of it. But with that comes the reward, which is we've seen in Seattle when he's firing on all cylinders, he can be a very effective quarterback. So I think it's just a matter of, can Frank Reich find a way in his offense to keep Geno's turnovers to a reasonable number? So probably somewhere in the double digits. That's just what you're going to get with Geno. But if he throws between 10 and 15 interceptions, but he also throws 30 touchdown passes, that's right along the lines of what we saw from Ryan Fitzpatrick. I believe Ryan Fitzpatrick had 30 and 15 that year in 2015. If you can get something like that, you take it at this point, because again, what people have to remember with Geno Smith is the Jets were trying to make the best of a bad situation. They didn't have a lot of positive options, and Geno Smith was brought in because he has had success at times as a starter before. He was very cheap, and he's a guy that they think they can work with as a bridge option to next year. So I think really the key here too is, can he gel with Frank Reich's offense, which according to early reports, it sounds like he's got it down pretty good so far. And can he get on the same page with the key wide receivers in this offense and the playmakers, including guys like Breece Hall, but then also Kenyon Sadiq, Mason Taylor. The biggest ones that he'll need to get on the same page with as far as going downfield are Garrett Wilson and A.D. Mitchell. And lucky for him, he's a guy that loves to take chances downfield, and those guys can get open downfield. A.D. Mitchell not only is incredibly fast, but he's an excellent route runner. So he can just blow guys away. If you go back and watch the tape last year, there were a lot of times where A.D. Mitchell just absolutely cooked some of the better corners. I mean, go back and watch that game against the Patriots. He absolutely left Christian Gonzalez in his dust a couple of times. It's just that the Jets quarterbacks couldn't get him the ball. So if Geno can go downfield to a guy like A.D. Mitchell or to Garrett Wilson, and then if he can make the most of the other guys that he's surrounded with, because listen, the offensive line, a billion times better than what he had with the Raiders last year. The playmakers, a billion times better than what he had with the Raiders last year. So if he can competently operate in that Frank Reich offense, I think, yeah, you're going to live with the turnovers. That's just part of what you get with Geno Smith, but you could get some really big plays as well, and that could make for a much more fun offensive season than we've seen in a while.
By the way, Scott, show some respect. There was 31 touchdown passes for Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2015, okay? Show a little respect for Fitzmagic, okay? Okay, buddy? Can you do that for me?
Oh, goodness.
Listen, I respect the beard. You and Ryan Fitzpatrick have gnarly beards, and I respect it.
All right, there you go. My quickie here before we take a timeout is just staying with quarterback. The Jets were exploring the quarterback market before any of this Geno Smith nonsense was going on. So obviously they were thinking about it before any of this Geno Smith stuff happened. Now that this is behind them and that it doesn't appear Geno Smith's availability for the season or anything is in question, are you still in favor of the Jets adding some sort of a quarterback, whether that's a veteran or a young player that has some starting experience? We've heard Will Levis's and Spencer Rattler's in trades or something of that nature. Would any of that intrigue you? Or, hey, let's ride it out with the guys that are on this roster right now?
I think it really depends on who becomes available and what it would take. If somebody shakes free as a cut that they like, cool. If there's a guy they can get for what I like to call the Darren Muji special, the late round pick swap that they think would be a good fit, that's cool too. Yeah. But ultimately, if they decide that they want to go with Bailey Zappi and Kid Klubnik and have them battle it out, I guess I might feel differently if I expected the Jets to contend for anything this year, but considering that this really is a transition year, and what I'm really looking for more than anything is I want to see the coaching staff take a step forward, and I want to see the young players play well. If I get that, I'm not as concerned. So I guess it really depends on how high they are on the two guys they've got right now, and it depends on who's available and what it would take. But yeah, I mean, look, if they want to bring in a Will Levis or Spencer Rattler and they think that would be helpful and they can make it happen without it costing a lot, fine. But if they want to try and get by with the other two guys, look, let's be real. I just don't think Rattler or Levis or anything is going to make a massive difference if Geno Smith goes down. So I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I'm cool if they do it. I'm cool if they don't, and I'm not really that concerned.
Talking with Scott Mason, our Jets insider this week, all things New York Jets. We are presented by Northeast Roofing Professionals, NERPCNY.com. Today's video brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. 30 seconds from Bayberry. We're back. A couple more questions on the Jets before we let Scott go. Stick around.
Integrity is a word that some people just throw around in life. But at Bayberry Automotive, integrity is everything. Integrity of their mechanics, who are all experienced and certified. Integrity in the work they perform, with nothing but 5-star reviews from satisfied customers on Google. Integrity that goes along with family, a family-run business that treats you like one of their own. Integrity in everything. Bayberry Automotive. BayberryAutomotive.com.
Located on Route 57 across from Bayberry Plaza, the premier choice for auto repair in Liverpool.
All right, we are back inside the Jets, talking all things Jets. Manchild, along with Paul Boy Green Esden Jr., and our Jets insider this week, Scott Mason from the Play Like a Jet Daily podcast. He's the big-time host there. We'll give Scott a chance at the end of the video to tell people all about that and what he's been up to. Go ahead, BG.
Yeah, real quick, just on Bayberry Automotive, right? We've mentioned that they have a brand-new location now. Before I went to this crazy party over the weekend for all Jet fans in Atlantic City, Gang Green Beach Club, shout out to Lou B and Jake Asman for throwing that together. That was sweet. I met a bunch of Jet fans and content creators who was awesome. But before that event, I had to make sure the car was ready to roll through Atlantic City so I didn't pull over on the side of the road. So I got an oil change at Bayberry Automotive. And this just goes to show you integrity in everything and doing everything right. I call ahead of time, as most people normally do for an oil change. I call up, say, hey,
appointment?
Yep, I'm calling for an appointment. Want to go to the new location. I went there last time. It was great. I'd like to go there again. Guy on the phone's like, hey, it wasn't John. It was another person. He's like, okay, gotcha. No problem. You're in for this date, this time. perfect. So I drive up that day last week before the event, and I show up, and John's sitting there. He's eating a piece of pizza. He's like, "Hey, Paul, great to see you, man." Yeah, it could have been possibly. And he was having a nice piece of pizza. He said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, the oil change, man. Remember?" He's like, I don't have you in the system. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have me in the system? I'm like, I called last week. I talked to some guy. It wasn't you. If it was you, I would have given you a hello. I said it was some other guy I didn't know. And, he makes a quick call. The other place is like, geez, that they messed it up. They accidentally sent you to the other location. Here's what I'll do for you. He says, go to the other location. That's on us. We messed something up here, and we'll give you a discount. And here you go. Go to the. That's something I said. I don't need a discount. I'm like, it's 5 minutes down the road. I don't care. But I came here because I thought it was here because that's what me and the guy talked about. But I don't care. I'll drive to the other one. It's no big deal. He said, no, Paul. No, we're not causing you any inconvenience for nothing. No, go to the other place. The discount's already applied, my friend. I'm like, okay, well, what a guy. So he didn't have to do that, but he went through the whole extra step because that's what they do over there. And I said, wow, that's a very nice. And guess what? The car, spoiler alert, car made it to the Atlantic City Ocean Casino Resort, and it made it back. Thank God, with the family intact. So thank you, Bayberry Automotive.
And I guarantee you that has nothing or little to do with the fact that John advertises with us, that he's been a loyal sponsor of our show in this digital world for quite a while now. They just treat everybody that way. So it's not just you or me or some special VIP person. Basically, that is their modus operandi there. They definitely live up to that integrity and everything thing. All right, Scott, integrity and everything. Let's talk about the Jets and this season. I mean, we are approaching camp. You mentioned it a little earlier in your answer. You have tempered expectations for the Jets. Obviously, the coaching staff, particularly the head coach, is kind of perhaps on the line here this season to at least show marked improvement. So what is marked improvement this year? What is it that you expect and are getting excited about as we're approaching the preseason camp now, training camp?
I actually predicted that the Jets would go 6-11 this year. I have them beating Tennessee in the opener. I have them beating the Dolphins twice. They don't seem all that interested in winning games this year. I have them winning against Arizona. Same thing. I don't think they seem all that interested in winning games. And then I've got them winning 2 home games against the Browns and the Raiders. I think the Raiders will be coming from all the way across the country. The Browns might have an even messier situation than the Jets do right now. So I have them going 6-11. I'm not really that concerned about the record. I know a lot of fans will get on me for that. How patient are you going to be? I think you got to be realistic. This is a team that has a lot of young talent that you want to see take strides. And it's all to set up next year for whoever they hopefully can get quarterback, right? What I'm really looking for, and I said this to you guys before, I think the important thing is I want the coaching staff to show me that they're the right guys, and I want the young players to ascend. I'd love to see guys like A.D. Mitchell, who came in here last year and showed some potential. We talked about him before. I'd like to see him grow into a bona fide number 2 or number 3 receiver. I'd love to see Omar Cooper Jr. have a nice rookie year. The 2 tight ends start to ascend. I'd like to see Breece Hall take another step back towards where he was his rookie year before those injuries. I'd like to see some of the defensive players, David Bailey, Will McDonald, those guys under Aaron Glenn's direction now, calling the defense. I'd like to see those guys take a step forward. Basically, I want to know that heading into 2027, as Albert Breer likes to say, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that the Jets are in the right hands, both front office wise and coaching wise, and that the players that they've brought in here, the younger guys that they're hoping to be key pieces, that those guys are able to show that are very much keepers for the long haul. If the Jets can do that this year while entertaining us and not making us turn the TV off halfway through games or be disillusioned by October or November, that's really the goal. I know that sounds like I'm aiming low, but it's because I am aiming low, because you have to be reasonable with your expectations for this season. This team was not built to be a playoff contender. Now, I will qualify it by saying this. You've been around watching the Jets long enough. Manchild, you've been watching Jets, the Giants, the Bills, all these teams. You know what to do. Really what it comes down to is if everything goes right, if lightning strikes 1,000 times, the Jets could be a wild card contender. I think it was Aaron Schatz was on the Athletic Football Show, and he said there is a universe where Geno Smith gets in sync with his receivers and where his turnovers are limited to a reasonable level. The defense takes a slow, which it wouldn't take much, and the Jets are in the playoff conversation. He said, look, we probably don't live in that universe, but there's a universe where it exists. So the absolute peak would be they backdoor into a playoff spot, but more likely, I think it's what I'm talking about, a 6-win season, something along those lines. And you hope for entertaining games and a roster and a coaching staff that look like they're ready to start taking the next step in 2027.
So, Scott, if the Jets do as you say and win these 6 games against, with all due respect, and if I say that I can then say anything, these slappy opponents like Arizona and Cleveland and Tennessee and Miami twice, like if those are the slappy teams that they beat and Aaron Glenn wins 6 games, is that enough to save his job heading into 2027?
Yeah, I love how you about that. Once you say all due respect, you can say anything. It reminds me of that Dom Herrera bit where he said he calls them a Italian eraser phrases. And if you're Italian or you grew up around Italians, you know what that means. It's like, all due respect, but your sister's bank, that kind of thing. It's like, as long as you say due respect, and the horrible thing you say after that, not that you just did that, but it's just kind of funny, those qualifier phrases. I think it really depends with Aaron Glenn. I suspect, and this is just me, I think that Woody Johnson is going to give Aaron Glenn every opportunity to stick around in 2027. He was Woody Johnson's choice. He's a guy that has a long history with Woody Johnson, and Woody has traditionally been very patient. I know a lot of people paint the picture of Woody as who acts impulsively, but if you get head coaching decisions and how long he's given these guys, for the most part, he tends to step back and give people a significant period of time. So I think if they win those games, and then if they are and play well, and you see progress, both the way they handle things game in, game out, and how the young players play, if Woody Johnson is convinced that the Jets are heading in the right direction from those standpoints, I think that Aaron Glenn will be back. I think the problem will come if Jets get blown out a lot, if they look listless, if the locker room gives up on him. And let's remember, and this is one thing that Rich Cimini, who you referenced before, has been very clear many times. The one thing above anything else that if you want to say something positive about Aaron Glenn last year that you could say is that the players never stopped believing in him. He never lost the locker room. So if that continues and if they take strides in the right areas, then I think that's more important than whatever the final record is. But you got to remember too, last year, a lot of those blowout losses were when the Jets had begun to wave the white flag. We know what was going on. They were guys that I, as a guy who covers the Jets every day, didn't even know. There were times I'd look at the number and be like, who is that guy? And then they had Brady Cook at quarterback. They were very clearly, it was the most open embrace of the tank I've ever seen from this team. So that's why they got absolutely manhandled in a lot of those games. But if they're competitive, if they show life week in, week out, if they win significantly more games than last year, which wouldn't take a lot, and by significant, it would only be a couple more that it would do it, then yeah, I think Glenn will be back. I think it's only a major issue if the locker room quits on him and if they're getting obliterated and Woody feels like he's being embarrassed.
Well, there he is, Scott Mason, the Play Like a Jet daily podcast. And BG, I know you're a big viewer, listener. Give people a little plug. Tell people about what Scott's always up to.
100%. Scott Mason's a longtime radio guy, does a Play Like a Jet podcast. It's a daily audio podcast. He's been doing it for nearly 10 years, every single day, talking about the New York Jets with engaging interviews, solo shows, mailbag shows. He does a little bit of everything, talking, of course, all things New York Jets every single day. Certainly an inspiration for my daily video show, Boy Green Daily, which I've been doing for several years, to see that level of dedication. So a huge shout out to Scott Mason. He's one of the pioneers of Jets podcasting for sure. So appreciate him joining us on short notice, because for those of you that listen to the pre-recorded version, you have no idea when we record or anything, but the Geno Smith news broke a few hours ago. I said, man, we should get something immediately on this Geno Smith situation. So that's exactly what's happening this week. So shout out to Scott Mason for joining us on the show.
Scott literally joining us from his car in a parking lot. So we do appreciate it, and we'll get him back in more sterile, dare I say, pristine conditions on a future video. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Our little Inside the Jets segment, and lots more content coming the rest of this week. So don't forget, at MC Show Digital, you see it right there, youtube.com/at MC Show Digital. We want you, as Uncle Sam would say, to become a subscriber. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, I should say, and we need you to get us there. We are in the home stretch. We just need a little bit of a push. So tell your friends, tell your family. If you're not already a subscriber, it's absolutely free, and you help support the channel in a really cool way. All right, for Boy Green, Manchild signing off. We'll see you on the next video, folks. Take care.